This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager.
Name and job title, please.
Estelle Vasudevan. I'm an editor at thepapare.com.
Can Sri Lanka win the World Cup? You didn't think I was going to ask that straight up, did you?
I mean, the obvious answer is no, right? But I mean, I don't know. It seems like Sri Lanka is the new Pakistan, right? You don't know what's coming until something like crazy happens.
It's unlikely, isn't it? We'll get to the full reasons why, but it's unlikely. It's, the last 4 years have not been brilliant one-day cricket. I think they've shown flashes of a lot of talent, and we know that there are players there, and that this team is kind of accidentally assembling at the right time. But you wouldn't be, I'm assuming you're not going to put a lot of your hard-earned money on a victory.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone will be, right? I think if you look at how Sri Lanka has gone over the last few years, there have been kind of those moments where you think, yeah, this team could really challenge a lot of the other teams. And then you look at who they've played. They haven't been playing some of the top countries over the past couple of months, particularly. Like at the moment, sitting on 11 consecutive wins. But none of them have come against top 5 opposition. So it's very tough, I think, to say that Sri Lanka will go in and win or be one of the favorites, because it's just how things have gone. Like, you don't consider them one of the top teams anymore, right?
No, I mean, so I'm just having a look at Odds Checker. So that's the site that looks at all the different markets of betting. The shortest price I could see is 18 to 1. And the longest price seems to be about 33 to 35 to 1, right? So, they're a long way back. The next shortest team is New Zealand, who are around 8 to 10 to 1. Or actually, South Africa and New Zealand are around 8, 9, 10 to 1, right? So they're at least half as likely to win according to the money as anyone else, and in some cases even 3 times less likely to win than South Africa and New Zealand. I think that's maybe a little bit over the top considering the talent they have, but people aren't betting on them. There's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the way they've gone over the last couple of years doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, does it? Like, I mean, they ended up in the qualifiers. Of course, they were a class apart in that group of teams, but that consistency against top teams is not something we've seen over the past couple of years. I mean, I think a lot of Sri Lankan fans would agree with me when I say that they don't really play modern day limited overs cricket. The bowling attack makes up for a lot of what is wrong. You've got genuinely two to three world class bowlers in that lineup, but in terms of the batting and just playing the type of cricket that we see from the top nations playing, it just isn't there on the batting front.
Yeah, and I think there's a stigma a little bit in playing in the qualifiers that probably, as you said, once you hear that Sri Lanka has got to that level, you kind of understand how far they have struggled over recent times, right? Like there's a reason why that Sri Lanka ended up in those qualifiers. It wasn't an accident, was it?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, if there was like long-term planning involved, right, I think 2023 would have been the perfect year where Sri Lanka could have set themselves up to at least reach the semifinals of a World Cup, because it's being played in India. Maybe conditions won't be as Asian as we've come to expect in the past, but that 2023 being played in India would have been the perfect opportunity for Sri Lanka. But since 2019 itself, the World Cup, I think, was assembled maybe a couple of weeks before with, guys like Jeevan Mendis, Milinda Sirivardhana making the squad. If at that point they had a long-term plan and they had built towards it, I think Sri Lanka would have been in a different place. But there's a very, I would say, tendency to really play it safe. Like if you look at some of the selections in the recent past, bringing back Dimut Karunaratne, one example, right? He hasn't done much wrong, but pairing him with Pathum Nisanka and then Kusal Mendis at number 3, it really gives you only one way to go about things, right? There's no surprise element in that top order. So um, things like that, where just the main thing, in my opinion, is that adapting to modern day cricket is just, it's been a massive issue.
But also, like, so since the last World Cup, and I might have written this a couple of days ago, so I'm not sure if the Pallekele game against Bangladesh. Oh no, that was in August, wasn't it? Yeah. So since the last World Cup, they have won 16 games and lost 18 against World Cup teams, right? So that is against the stronger teams in the world. And then they have won 11 and 10 in the last 2 years. But as you said before, I think they won one game and lost 8 in, what was that, from the middle of 22 to the start of 2023. And then they won, is it 11 in a row after that?
Yeah. Right now it's 11 in a row.
Yeah.
2 against Afghanistan, and then qualifiers, and the last game against Bangladesh.
Yeah. So, and it should be pointed out that while they have won those 2 games against Afghanistan, they also struggled in a series against Afghanistan, and lost the game at home against Afghanistan this year, right? So,
yeah,
even when they have played some of the teams who are lower down on that World Cup, level, they haven't been absolutely breathtaking, have they?
No, they haven't. That's, I think, a major worry. Like the qualifiers too, there were some moments where you weren't sure about what was going to happen. I think the game against the Netherlands was one where it could have gone either way. So they haven't been, particularly the batting has not really, I mean, it doesn't, you don't feel that encouraged watching them go, particularly if they've got to chase a big total or there's a half decent bowling attack from the opposition.
All right, batting is what I want to talk to you about. So I did a bit of a rankings just for myself. I'll be doing some World Cup stuff. I've got them as the 4th worst batting team when they're playing against the best teams. And I think that was over the last 2 years. They average 27 runs per wicket. So not particularly, it's not like they've got a bunch of anchors batting slow. They're actually getting dismissed at a fairly high rate, right? You want to be over 30 runs per wicket. 32, 35 is elite. And they're also, though, while losing wickets, they're also going at 5.2 runs and over. So there isn't, I think when you do look at the batting, there isn't really any massive pluses that you would say, like if you're an opposition team coming up against Sri Lanka in a World Cup, that's not to say that one player can't have a great game and can change it, but you probably wouldn't go into that game thinking to yourself that this is a top quality batting lineup.
Yeah, no, that's I think the key issue, right? Because it's a game so advantageous to batters, or it goes a lot in batters' favor. If you look at Sri Lanka's lineup, Dimut Karunaratne, Pathum Nisanka opening the batting. Then you've got Kusal Mendis, who we can admit now, I think 8-10 years into his career, that he hasn't lived up to expectations, particularly in white ball cricket. He's had a poor year. Sadira Samaravikrama coming back into the side after sitting out for a few years. He's been decent, but again, very similar to that top 3, the way that he plays. Charit Asalanka, I think, is the only one who maybe kind of gives you something different. And they've got Dhananjay De Silva, Dasun Shanaka. Shanaka, again, not really done anything in limited overs cricket or in ODI cricket over the past couple of years. So, like you said, I mean, opposition will be looking at getting early wickets, and then, keeping the run rate down hasn't been that hard against Sri Lanka over the last 2 years.
Well, so I've got the numbers here. So last 2 years, I think, yeah, these are the last 2 years stats. Sri Lanka is averaging 43, which is really good. Strike rate of 87, so just slower than the global average. Kusal Mendes is averaging 34 with a strike rate of 84, so a little bit lower on runs and a little bit lower on strike rate. And Nasanka is 40, 86. That's fine, but we're not really pairing that with someone else with a strike rate of 110. There's no Josh Butler to back any of that up, right? There's no Hardik Pandya or Ravi Jadeja or anything else. And so the spine then is what you have is three guys who are good scorers, not great scorers, but good scorers, who are all slightly slower than the global average. And so it's hard to see how that is going to break out and be anything more special. Who had the good World Cup in the T20? Was it Nasanka that made runs? I can't even remember now.
Mendes and Nisanka both made runs.
Yeah, and so you look at that, and again, I know that's a slightly different format and everything else, but you look at that tournament, and I don't think anyone was looking at it going, well, this is a team that can score more runs than we can score, right? There's no way you're going to blow the barn doors off with anyone. Having said that, the one difference I would say now is that it's a pretty consistent batting lineup, right? You're probably not going to get bowled out for 200 very, very much anymore. And so, if you were a coach, Estelle, you would take the positives from that.
Yeah, I think that's what's happened. Like I was mentioning about, playing it safe. Someone like Dimuth Karunaratne, you wouldn't expect to do that well in limited overs cricket. But when they brought him in, he's got 100. He scored some runs consistently, scored a lot. He's exceeded expectations. But as you mentioned, it's nothing. Like, it's nothing extraordinary, right? From that batting lineup that you can expect. You'll have a day where Kusal Mendes maybe plays a fantastic knock, gets 100, or someone like Asalanka goes berserk at the end, Shanaka capable of the same. But it's tough to... It's a steady batting lineup, like you said. But if you're coming up against opposition like India, Pakistan, who've got really good bowling attacks, and you're playing on tracks like what Sri Lanka saw at the beginning of this year in India, where 350 was like par, then that's where Sri Lanka are really going to struggle, because consistently hitting those targets it's unlikely with this batting lineup.
So they made 350, I think. Was it against Oman in the qualifiers? Does that sound right? Or UAE?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I had it in front of me and I've just clicked away. But basically, I think in their last 70 ODIs, they have scored 350 on one occasion. Now, I'm not saying that 350 is par or anything like that, but if you look at other sides out there, they have the ability to occasionally score those sorts of totals, right? Which means that you can put pressure back. You're not relying on your bowlers just dominating at that point. I think that's going to be Sri Lanka's big thing, is that they probably, especially against a better team, I just don't think we can imagine, unless everyone fires on the one day, that they're going to score over 350 in this World Cup against the better teams. And so there's kind of like an automatic limit there. Now, having said that, it is worth talking about their bowling, because this is a lot better. In the bowling, when you look at the World Cup teams, they have the second best average. The fifth best economy, so they better at striking with the ball than they are, keeping scores low. I had them in my list as ranked about the fourth best bowling attack. Now, I'm assuming at this stage that people are actually going to be fit and available to play. Obviously, Hasaranga, not 100% sure what's going to happen there, but Chimera, I suppose we're never sure with Chimera. And in fact, all the Sri Lankan seamers, I'm never quite sure. But I would say that we haven't talked about this enough, but this Sri Lankan bowling attack, especially for Indian conditions, is fantastically well suited.
Yeah, I think if you look at that bowling lineup, even the Asia Cup Open against Bangladesh a couple of days ago, you've got four basically four of your best bowlers missing, right? Hasaranga, Chamira, Lahiru Kumara, and Dilshan Madhusankar not in the side. But Matisha Patiran is just 5 games into his career and he produces a spell like he did. So the depth is also there. I think if you look at the backups, they aren't obviously they aren't as good as the likes of Chamira or Hasaranga, but there is quality there. So that's one big plus for Sri Lanka and something they've depended on over the last couple of years. I mean, if you look at kind of the tournament that everyone spoke about as a turning point for Sri Lanka, it was that 2021 World Cup. And in that tournament, we saw how guys like Lahiru Kumara could dominate against particularly lower ranked teams. So coming into this World Cup as well, Hasaranga is obviously going to be key. Theekshana, I think, flies under the radar, but is as important as Hasaranga in that bowling attack because his role is kind of different, but the time the times he bowls, the tight overs that he delivers are really important for the other end, like you said, because Sri Lanka isn't that good at keeping the runs down. Chamira is gonna be a big. I don't know how you would pick him because you had him breaking down at the T20 World Cup last year. He had ankle surgery, came back injured his pectoral muscle. Now he's out with a shoulder injury. So I mean, it doesn't look that promising for him to come back. And even if he is fit, he's gonna come off basically no match fitness since he hasn't played consistently since last year. So that's going to be a huge worry for Sri Lanka, I think, because he just adds something extra to that bowling lineup. The fact that Dilshan Madhusankar has come through is, I think, massive because that left arm option is, like, if you look at the variety that Sri Lanka have, that's their main strength, right? They've got kind of an off spinner, mystery spinner. They've got the leg spinner. They've got fast bowlers who can hit that 150 mark. So that's going to be the key. But at this point, you don't know who's going to be fit and who they're going to be able to pick from, because even with Matisha Patirana, right, there's always going to be that cloud of, is he going to be completely fit, just because of the way he bowls, and he hasn't been in ODI cricket for long, he hasn't played much ODI cricket. So whether 10 overs is something that he can do, all of those questions are always going to be there.
Yeah, well, I mean, so just because you mentioned so many bowlers there. So Chamira, and as I said, these are the numbers against the best, the World Cup team. He's got a bowling average of 25, right? And I think I understand what you were saying, that they may not trust his body, and no one's going to trust his body at this point. But that you're not going to be able to replicate those kinds of numbers, probably, even with a backup, as good as some of those other backups are. Hasaranga, let's assume he's going to be fit for the World Cup. He's averaged 32.5, and the reason I wanted to mention that is because you said that Theekshana was kind of flown under the radar, and I think because Hasaranga's been so good, and obviously gone on, he's a flashier bowler. We talk more about him, but Theekshana has gone at an average of 24 runs, while going at 4.5 runs and over. Like, his record is just absolutely fantastic in one-day cricket. And I would say that, if you look at one-day cricket around the world, there is certainly finger spinners are struggling to take wickets in limited overs cricket at the moment. And Theekshana is, perhaps, as you said, because he's more of a mystery spinner than just a traditional finger spinner. But he's not struggling to take wickets at all. I mean, he's got a ridiculously good record. And to know that you can bowl him in the power play in the middle and then probably even sneak a couple of overs through later on gives him incredible flexibility with him. So his numbers completely hold up. And we've seen him bowl in the IPL. You'd think he'd be even more suited to, I mean, he went to Australia in the last World Cup and the T20 World Cup. That is a bit of a challenge for him. But going to Indian conditions, we've already seen him bowl well there.
Yeah, and like you said, the the biggest value with him is that he can bowl anywhere, right? You're definitely gonna see him bowling in the first 10 and the last 10, and he's a wicket taking option, which I think from that 2019 to kind of 21, that's one of the areas, or 2015 to 21, that's one of the areas that Sri Lanka struggled with, is picking up wickets in the middle overs, right? And now suddenly they have not just one option, but they have a couple of options who can do that, and that's going to be critical in those conditions. I think conditions are going to be massive, because if it's going to be flat and no assistance for bowlers at all, Sri Lanka are going to struggle. But if there's just even just a little bit in some of those tracks, I think the likes of Theekshana and Hasaranga are going to be really valuable.
And I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if it is a batting tournament, is there enough in this bowling attack? I mean, if you look at it, there's leg spin, there's mystery seam, I suppose you could say, in Patharana's action. There's pace and everything else. But the issue is that the opposition are still going to score runs, right? So you think that they need some kind of assistance from the surface in order for Sri Lanka to have more of help. If this is a batting tournament, and most World Cups aren't batting tournaments, but if this is a batting tournament, you don't think that Sri Lanka can keep up with the best teams?
I think it's going to be really tough, because if you look at 2019 as well, I think Sri Lanka exceeded expectations. They beat England out of nowhere, beat West Indies, came close against some of the other teams. And that was because the conditions weren't as batting friendly as everyone expected. I mean, going into that tournament, everybody thought, okay, England's the top, limited over side in the world. It's going to be 350 plus wickets, and then suddenly it was raining, and, the pitches were a lot slower than people expected, and teams like Sri Lanka got in the game. Similarly here, I think that's no matter how good the bowling attack is, I think we saw that during Sri Lanka's tour of India as well earlier this year. It's just the batting's not good enough to be chasing 320, 350 consistently, right? So how often are the bowlers going to be able to keep some of the bigger teams down to, below 300? That's going to be really tough, I think.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think it makes sense. If they could take enough wickets, then clearly that gives the batters a chance. But it's not about I know some of those economy rates I said there before were good. It's not really about the economy rates, because I think the best teams will still score at around a run a ball against them. But if they can keep up their averages, if you're playing against, South Africa, India, England, those sorts of really consistent scoring teams, and you can take wickets against them, I think you can keep yourself in the game a little bit more. Patharana, you talked about him. I remember last year, my biggest concern was that he was just going to be a death bowler, and that he wasn't going to add all the different skills that he needed, especially because in T20 cricket, by just being a death bowler, if he just worked on death bowling for the next 10 years, he's going to get paid for the next 10 years, and he doesn't have to worry about anything else. It feels to me that since that last IPL, which was probably the last time I watched him really, really closely, although I've seen little bits of him play since then, but that was the last time I watched him really, really closely. I'd say he's just added little bits to his game then. He's got such a natural advantage with this round arm bowling action, but if you can't be good with the new ball, if you can't be handy with the ball in the middle overs, and when people are chipping it around and other things, you do become very one-dimensional. And in one-day cricket, because the game's so long, you actually need probably slightly more rounded skill sets than you do in T20 cricket. Do you think in this World Cup, they're going to play him? He's going to be a frontline player with let's imagine everyone's fit. Do you think that he would be in the side automatically? And do you think that his other skills are now good enough that you can pick him?
I think if everybody's fit, he's probably not going to play every game. There might be kind of a rotation. I don't know, because it looks like particularly Chamira being fit would mean he's dead set for that one spot. And then Dilshan Madhusankar as the left armer is going to take up the other fast bowling spot. I don't think Sri Lanka will be looking at more than 2 quicks in that bowling lineup. So he's probably going to be third in line. But just watching him in the Asia Cup so far, the one game we've seen so far, I think he has got the skills now to really be a threat in ODI cricket. A lot of people, including myself, we were skeptical, about how is he going to hold up in ODIs. It's a longer game. You've got to kind of, it's not one dimensional, right? I mean, not that T20 cricket is, but like you said, if he was bowling in the death and he's nailing Yorkers every delivery, that would be good enough, right? But just how I think the way he's used is also really important, because we saw in the Asia Cup, he was brought on in the 11th over, so no new ball for him. And again, coming back to Theekshana, that's the value he adds there, right? Sri Lanka can still play the 2 quicks and have one of them come on a little bit later, because they've got that option of Theekshana with the new ball. I think Pathirana has the skills, but if everyone is fit, he might be the third option.
Now, what we've seen over the last couple of years is the fifth bowlers now, it's very hard to cheat your fifth bowler, especially in one-day cricket. I think it was it's funny, I've just been doing the history of ODI cricket, and you realise that early on, that was kind of what would happen. You'd bring on your fifth bowler, and West Indies specifically would wait for that fifth bowler to come on and then whack them everywhere and cause chaos with the opposition team. And then we had quite a few years where people wouldn't do that as much, right? And it was a little bit more, they're bowling in the middle overs, we'll just knock them around for a couple of runs. We're certainly back in a period now where people are really attacking that fifth bowler. Is, DDS, Dhananjaya de Silva, the most elegant, cricketer in the men's game at the moment, is he a good enough bowler to bowl 10 overs a game in Asian conditions, and specifically Indian conditions? So his bowling over the last couple of years, he's averaged 34 with the ball, which is actually pretty good, with an economy of 4.4. He's going to be under more pressure. How much of those numbers are good because he hasn't always had to be the fifth bowler? He could be the 5th/6th bowler at times. And how much of those numbers are going to be tested by the best batting lineups in the world, who won't just knock him around, and they will, he's a very good. He's like a high functioning part timer, right? Rather than a frontline bowler. But he's a very clever cricketer. So where do you think? Is he good enough to play as that fifth bowler? Will they play him as a batter, as the sixth bowler, and use him when necessary? How do you think they'll work that out?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, he's a very smart cricketer and very smart bowler. I think it's his bowling skill that's kept him in the side, if I'm being honest, because there's no other way you fit him in at number 5, number 6, right? So he's got the skills. I'm not sure if 10 overs is too much to ask from him, because, like you said, it's not going to be a case where, they're going to play him down, knock him for a few singles, right? There are going to be batters who take him on, and he's probably going to have to contend with that there are going to be batters really attacking him, even if he does bowl in the middle over. So that's, I think, going by what we've seen from Sri Lanka cricket, they will pick him as the fifth bowler or 5th/6th. They'll expect Dasun Shanaka to put in a few overs. But in my opinion, they can do away with one of the batters and have Wanindu at number 7, because he's shown that he has the ability to bat, right? You're playing him at number 8, doesn't really make much of an impact. So you might as well take that gamble, push him one position up, and then have that extra bowling option.
Yeah, he's averaging 25 or 30 in one-day cricket over the last couple of years. Does that sound about right with him? I remember having a look at it. He hadn't made a lot of runs, but I think that he has actually made ODI runs when he's had a chance, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think when he's been pushed up the order, when he's had a couple of opportunities, I think at number 4, number 5, just as a floater, they've used him a couple of times, and he's had good runs. He's made a lot of runs in domestic cricket as well. If you look at the recently concluded LPL, I know T20 cricket, different format, but He obviously has the ability to bat. It's just that when you're coming in at number 8, is that the right time to utilize the type of batter he is? I think he's more of a classical option who you would want to be batting not lower than number 6. So that I think that's what they should do. But I have a just looking at how things have gone, I think Dharanja De Silva will play as the 5th bowler.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think though the fact that both of those players have utility. I mean, DDS I think his batting average is 30 with a strike rate of 82. I actually think that the only way you could get the most out of him as a batter is probably batting him in the top order. And I don't think you can do that in one-day cricket. I think the bowling is too good at the top level of the World Cup. You really need to fit him in down the order. T20 might be slightly different where you can cheat it a little bit more. But you look at Hasaranga, he, with the bat in ODIs, where are we here? So in 2017, that's too far along. 2021, sorry, he made 356 runs that year, averaging 27. 2022 only played 5 games, but it made 126 runs, averaging 40. This year he's made 160 runs and has struggled just a little bit more in the games, averaging 17. But a lot of that is also, as you said, where he comes in the order. So, when he's batted at number 7, though, can I throw this to you? When he's batted at number 7, what do you think his average is?
Is it not good?
It's not good. It's 14, right? When he bats at number 8, he averages 31. So that could be a fluke, right? Because we don't know what situations. He hasn't batted that much for Sri Lanka in one-day cricket to be 100% know if that's just a fluke or what the situation is. But I think the two of them, maybe because they can both bat and bowl, right? They should give Sri Lanka a possibility to when they want to go in with 5 bowlers and just attack with the ball, they can do that. And then when they want to be slightly more circumspect, stack the batting a little bit more and have Dhananjaya bowl as the 5th bowl. So there are certain teams where that perhaps New Zealand or South Africa who are more prone to knocking the ball around, right? Maybe those are the games when you pick Dhananjaya as your 5th bowler, and then when you have to absolutely take as many wickets as possible against probably India and maybe Australia and England, that's when you pick the 5 bowlers. So the fact that they have both those 2 players there, I do think gives them great flexibility. But we also, I don't think we know what their best lineup is going to be, which is the biggest problem is in the last 2 years, we've only had 2 Sri Lankan teams to look at. One that didn't win any games, and then one that has won a lot of games against poorer opposition. So we don't know as much about how strong these particular teams are against the very best, which means that there's a danger playing Sri Lanka coming into this tournament. The Asia Cup might answer some of those questions, but it's only going to be a couple of games, of course. But going ahead, they're a bit of I almost think they're a very good spoiler team in that we don't know how good they are going to be, and you and I have looked into this. The opposition aren't going to know that much either, and we don't know how many wickets they will transfer over. But I think that in order for them to be a very good bowling team, to be a very good team in this World Cup, I think they're definitely going to have to average, under 28 with the ball. Right, which if that's the case, then I think that goes back to your Hasaranga point of probably going to have to play as a bowler. You go in with 5 specialist bowlers, and you hope that's enough. You hope that your top order at least can score 270 to 290 consistently, and then that you're taking enough wickets to keep the pressure on everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's how Sri Lanka would hope that things go. Because if you look at even the other options in terms of the spin bowlers, you don't have that many. So if they're going to play 5 specialist bowlers, it'll have to be a quick. But they've got options on that side if everyone is fit. Yeah, it's tough to call. They'll need a lot of runs, I think, at the top of the order. And strangely, I think Karunaratne is going to be a really key figure at the World Cup, because he's he's been a lot more consistent than the other players. Like I mentioned before, Kusal Mendes has had a bad 2023. He hasn't got that many runs. But Karunaratne came in, suddenly he's scoring. He's giving you that platform to go off from. A lot of people in Sri Lanka don't like it, but he's unexpectedly done quite okay, right? So he might end up being actually a really key figure for Sri Lanka at the World Cup.
All right, I'm going to put this to you. I don't think they can win the World Cup because I just don't think they can make enough runs consistently to threaten the top 5 teams. I think the best case scenario for Sri Lanka is probably stealing their way into a semi-final position, right? And you never know, once you're in a semi-final, things can go your way. But I think their best case scenario is probably stealing their way into a semi-final position. I think the worst case scenario is that the best strike bowlers from around the world just go through that top order, and they're not even in contention for a semi-final position. So most likely, I think there'll be a time in this tournament, a bit like there was in the World Test Championship, where you go, oh, Sri Lanka's got a chance of making the finals here, and then it doesn't happen. So that's my best case, worst case, and most likely case situation. How do you see it?
Yeah, I agree completely. Particularly looking at the format of the World Cup this year, when you've got to play the other 9 teams, and there's no hiding, there's no sneaking in, right? So best case scenario would be a semi-final finish. I think hopefully the conditions are a little more favorable to the bowlers. That would give them the best chance.
Yeah, no, I mean, that'll be the interesting thing. I think if the conditions are more favorable towards the bowlers, then I do really rate their bowling. And if the conditions are more favorable to the bowlers, I'm less worried about the fact that their economy is not as good with the bowling, right? Because at that point, if they have the opportunity to take regular wickets, there's something there. I'd be shocked if it's going to be a bowling tournament, this particular one. It might be a balanced tournament rather than a batting tournament, but I'd be shocked if it's a bowling tournament. But I do think if it's a bowling tournament, because they can strike with so many different options, and as we've talked about, if they have injuries, I think they can certainly replace them as well. But anyway, Estelle, again, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.